Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, so let me introduce myself. My name is Muhammad Azmi Adian, and I am a student of Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, University of Muhammadiyah Lampung, English Literature, Batch 2, 2024. And this time, I want to present my presentation about Introduction to British History. So let's just get next into it. The first here we have the table of contents. In chapter 1 we will discuss about the prehistory of British, and then the Roman Empire, Anglo-Saxons, and the last will be British nobility. First, introduction. The Great Britain is an island consisting of 3 countries, England, Scotland, and Wales. It is also the name of the islands itself. The United Kingdom, on the other hand, is a sovereign state comprised of Great Britain, England, Scotland, and Wales, and Northern Ireland. We're moving to the chapter 1, Prehistory of British. Prehistory is the time before written records. It's the period of human history we know the least about, but it's also the longest by far. The earliest known humans arrived in these lands around 900,000 years ago. Prehistory stretches from then until the Roman invasion in Anno Domini 43. In the hundreds of thousands of years before history began, these lands underwent huge climatic, societal, political, technological, and geological changes. EnglishHeritage.org.uk. And then ages and ages. To deal with the massive spans of time in this period, archaeologists traditionally divide prehistory into 3 main periods: the Stone, the Bronze, and the Iron Ages, named after the main technologies used at the time. And each period is subdivided, for example, the Stone Age into the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic, Old, Middle, and New Stone Ages. Stone Age, the Neolithic. The Neolithic period in British history, also known as the New Stone Age, spans roughly from 4000 before Common Era to 2500 before Common Era. It marks a major transformation in how people in Britain lived, moving from hunter-gatherer societies of the Mesolithic period to settled farming communities. And then, the key features of the Neolithic in Britain. First, in the farming and settlements, people began growing crops like wheat and barley and domesticating animals such as cattle, sheep, and pigs. The shift to farming led to permanent settlements, often with rectangular or circular timber houses. Land was cleared of forests for farming, changing the natural landscapes. And then, monuments and megaliths. The Neolithic is famous for its ritual and burial monuments. And Stonehenge in Wiltshire started around 3000 before Common Era, developed through the Neolithic into the Bronze Age. Avebury, a massive henge and stone circle also in Wiltshire. Skara Brae, a well-preserved Neolithic village in Orkney, Scotland. Other structures include long barrows in burial mounds and causeway enclosures. And then, in the tools and the technology. Tools were made from polished stone rather than just chipped flint. Pottery emerged, grooved ware and Peterborough ware, used for cooking and storage. And then, in social and religious life, communities were likely organized around kinship groups. Monumental architecture suggests a strong spiritual and ritual component, possibly linked to ancestor worship, astronomy, or seasonal cycles. And then, in trade and mobility. Although settled, Neolithic people in Britain traded materials such as obsidian and flint, and axes from Langdale nearby in for people nearby Lake District. They were in contact with groups across Ireland and continental Europe. And then this is the importance of the Neolithic in British history. The Neolithic period marks the foundation of British prehistoric civilization. It was a time of innovation, agricultural revolution, and monumental construction that laid the groundwork for the later Bronze and Iron Ages. After the Stone Age, there was a Bronze Age. The Bronze Age in British history lasted from around 2500 before Common Era to 800 before Common Era, following the Neolithic period. It marks a time of significant technological, social and cultural development characterized primarily by the use of metal tools and weapons, especially bronze, which is an alloy of copper and tin. The key features of Bronze Age in Britain The key features of Bronze Age in Britain. First, in metalworking revolution. Bronze tools replaced stone ones. It's stronger, more durable, and easier to shape. Common bronze items: axes, swords, knives, chisels, pins, and decorative jewelry. Britain had rich copper and tin resources, particularly in Cornwall and Wales, which led to early trade networks. 2. In burial practices. A shift from communal Neolithic burials like long barrows to individual burials in round barrows, often buried with grave goods such as pottery, weapons, or ornaments reflecting status. The Beaker culture, named after their distinctive pottery, arose around 2500 before Common Era, bringing new burial customs and perhaps new people from continental Europe. And then, in social organization and trade, society became more hierarchical, with signs of chiefs or elites who controlled land, metal, resources, and trade. Evidence of long-distance trade in gold, amber, and metalwork connecting Britain to Europe. Settlements grew larger and more permanent, with some defensive structures emerging. And then, in agriculture and daily life, farming became more advanced, use of plows, crop rotation, and field systems. People lived in round houses made of timber and thatch. And then in religion and ritual landscapes like Stonehenge continued to be used and modified. The Bronze Age saw the building of stone circles, burial mounds, and ritual sites. Possible worship of suns, ancestors or nature deities, though exact beliefs are unknown. There are notable sites and artifacts of Bronze Age in Britain. 1. Stonehenge in Wiltshire, continued development into the Bronze Age. And then Flackfen in Cambridgeshire, timber causeways and ritual deposition of metalwork. And then after the Bronze Age, we go to Iron Age. By around 800 before Common Era, iron began to replace bronze for tools and weapons, marking the start of the Iron Age. Societies became more tribal and warfare increased, but much of the Bronze Age's agricultural and social structure remained influential. The Iron Age in Britain lasted from around 800 before Common Era to 43 Common Era, ending when Romans invaded. It was a time of major social change, marked by the use of iron tools and weapons, the development of tribal societies, and increasingly fortified settlements. There are key features of Iron Age in Britain. 1. The use of iron. Iron replaced bronze as the dominant metal for tools, weapons, and farming equipment. Iron was stronger, more abundant and easier to produce than bronze, enabled more effective farming, building, and warfare. 2. In hill forts and settlements. People began living in hill forts, large defensible sites on hilltops surrounded by earthworks or stone walls. These were centers of power, protection, and possibly trade. Villages consisted of round houses made of timber and thatch. And then 3. Tribal societies. Britain was divided into tribes ruled by chieftains or kings. Examples of tribes: Iceni, Catuvellauni, Trinoventis. Tribal identity was strong and warfare between tribes was common. Status was shown through warfare, land ownership, and metalwork. 4. In farming and economy. Agriculture remained the economic foundation. Wheat, barley, and animal husbandry. Tools like iron plows improved farming. People traded goods like grain, livestock, salt, wool, and metalwork. 5. In art and culture. Known for Celtic art, intricate designs, curving patterns, and symbols in metal, pottery, and carvings. Skilled in metalwork, torques or neck rings, brooches, and weapons. No written records from this time, but oral storytelling and Druidic religion may have been important. 6. Religion and beliefs. Belief system centered on nature, spirits, and possibly gods and goddesses. Druids were likely religious leaders, advisors, and judges. Sacred sites included groves, rivers, and springs. Okay, and now we're moving to chapter 2, the Romans. The Romans in British history represent a transformative period that began with the Roman invasion in 43 Common Era under Emperor Claudius and lasted until around 410 Common Era, when Roman rule in Britain ended. This era is known as Roman Britain, and it brought significant changes to the island's society, economy, infrastructure, and culture. The Romans. 1. The Roman invasion. Led by Aulus Plautius and under orders from Emperor Claudius. Initial resistance came from the local tribes, such as the Catuvellauni. The Romans quickly established control over southern Britain. The first image is the illustration of Aulus Plautius, and the second image is the map of Catuvellauni. And the third image is illustration of when Romans invaded South Britain. 2. Military conquest and rebellions. By around 80 Common Era, most of England and Wales were under Roman control. The Romans faced several rebellions, the most famous being Boudicca's revolt, queen of the Iceni tribe, who led a major uprising, destroying Roman towns like Londinium or London before being defeated. The first image is illustration of Roman when taking control over England and Wales, and the second is the illustration of Boudicca's rebellion. The girl you see here is Boudicca, the queen of the Iceni tribe. And then the third image is illustration of when the Boudicca's army destroyed the Roman towns. And then number 3, Romanization. The Romans built a network of roads, towns, villas, and forts, introduced Roman law, currency, weights and measures, and Latin language. Cities like Londinium or London, Ibericum, York, and Verulamium or Saint Albans became important administrative centers. The Roman way of life spread to the native elite, especially in the south. The pictures above is roads made by Romans. Okay. And then Hadrian's Wall, built in 122 Common Era, constructed by order of Emperor Hadrian to mark the northern boundary of Roman Britain, stretches 73 miles across the northern isle, stretches 73 miles across northern England, with forts, mile castles, and towers. Beyond it lived unconquered tribes like the Picts in what is now Scotland. This is the illustration of Emperor Hadrian, and then Hadrian's Wall, and then the third image is Picts, which is the only tribe that cannot be conquered by the Romans. Number 5. Religion and culture. Romans brought polytheistic religion, which gradually merged with local Celtic beliefs. By the 4th century, Christianity spread, especially after it was legalized by Emperor Constantine. Roman baths, amphitheaters, mosaics, and temples were part of urban life. Okay, this is the evolution of Roman religion from polytheism to Christianity. And then the second picture is the illustration of Emperor Constantine. The third picture is Roman baths. The fourth is Roman amphitheaters, but now is known as Colosseum. And the fifth picture is the most famous Roman mosaic. Okay. The end of Roman rule. By the early of 400s, Rome was under pressure from Germanic invasions. Troops were recalled to protect the empire closer to home. Roman Britain was left vulnerable and soon faced invasions by Anglo-Saxons and Jutes. The Roman legacy remained, but Roman control officially ended around 410 Common Era. The first picture is the illustration of Germanic invasion, and the second is situations in 500s after the Germanic invasion. And then the third image is the illustration of Germanic tribe known as barbarian. And of course, the Roman Empire left some legacies in Britain. First is foundations of many modern British cities. For example, London, York, Chester. Introduction of urban planning, stone buildings and central heating. Long-term influence of law, language, architecture, and Christianity. The first picture is York, and second is London, and the third picture is Chester. As you can see from the pictures above, the roads and buildings are Roman featured. Buildings made by Romans were known for their extremely strong resistance. In chapter 3, we will be discussing about Anglo-Saxons. The Anglo-Saxons were a group of tribes from Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands who began settling in Britain after the end of Roman rule around 410 Common Era. Their influence shaped much of early medieval English history until the Norman conquest in 1066. Origins and arrival came from tribes like the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, initially invited as mercenaries to help defend Roman Britain from invaders, eventually settled permanently and established kingdoms, pushing native Britons westward into Wales, Cornwall, and Scotland. There are 7 kingdoms of Anglo-Saxon heptarchy. The land was divided into several small kingdoms, collectively known as the heptarchy. Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Essex, Sussex, Kent, and Wessex. These kingdoms often fought each other for power and land. Over time, Wessex, especially under King Alfred the Great, became dominant. Society and culture. Ruled by kings and earls, local governance was managed by thegns or noblemen, thegns in modern English. Society was based on kinship, land ownership, and loyalty. Most people were farmers, living in small villages and working the land. Their language, Old English, became the basis for modern English. They brought Germanic pagan beliefs but gradually converted to Christianity, starting in 597 Common Era with Saint Augustine's mission. The sentence ruled by kings and earls. Now let's break down the sentence ruled by kings and earls. 1. King. King is the highest ranking leader, often ruling over a larger territory or kingdom. Meanwhile, Jarl or Earl is a nobleman and ruler, holding a position of authority below the king. Jarls could govern specific regions or tribes, often controlling land, resources, and people. In some cases, Jarls might have had earls under their command. The terms Jarl in Old Norse and Earl in Old English are essentially the same. And this is the illustration of king and Jarl. And then in religion and Christianization, early Anglo-Saxons were pagan, worshipping gods like Woden, Thunder, and Tyr. The arrival of Christian missionaries from Rome and Ireland changed that. Monasteries like Lindisfarne and Canterbury became centers of religion, learning, and art. Created illuminated manuscripts like the Lindisfarne Gospels. In this picture, this is the pagan religions. There are 12 religions in pagan religions. And then the second picture is Christian missionaries, which is the Constantine, when the Constantine spread the Christianity. And then the second picture is Lindisfarne Gospels. And then there was Viking invasion from 8th to 11th century. From the late 700s, Vikings from Scandinavia began raiding and settling parts of England. By the 9th century, much of England was under Danish control, which was named as Danelaw. Alfred the Great of Wessex defended Anglo-Saxon territory and promoted education, military reform, and law. And then there was also unification and decline. King Athelstan is often called the first king of all England. Anglo-Saxon England was briefly ruled by Danish kings like King Canute in the 11th century. After internal struggles and the death of Edward the Confessor, Harold Godwinson became king in 166. That same year, William the Conqueror of Normandy defeated Harold at the Battle of Hastings, ending the Anglo-Saxons' rule. This is the illustration of King Athelstan, who was the first king of the England. And then there is also the illustration of King Canute, or King Canute in modern spelling. And then there's also the illustration of when William defeated the Harold at the Battle of Hastings. And then the Anglo-Saxons also left legacies. The Anglo-Saxons left a lasting impact on British history in several ways. One of their most important contributions was to the English language, Old English, which they spoke and wrote, eventually developed into the English we use today. They also laid the groundwork for early legal systems, including concepts like trial by jury and common law. Many towns and villages across England still carry Anglo-Saxon names, especially those ending in "town" or "ham". In terms of religion, the Anglo-Saxons were key in spreading Christianity throughout the country, building churches and founding monasteries. Culturally, they produced important literary works such as the epic poem Beowulf, as well as riddles and early historical writings that give us insight into their world. These are the example of um, town ending in "ton" or "ton", from English, from Old English "ton" meaning farm or settlement, Luton, Lee farm or settlement, Taunton, farm by the River Tone, and Northampton, North Homestead. And then there are also some towns ending in "ham", from Old English "ham" meaning home or village, Birmingham, home of the Burma people, Nottingham, Snottingham, then Durham. These names endings these names endings show how the Anglo-Saxons named places these name endings show how the Anglo-Saxons named places based on who lived there, the landscape, or what the area was used to or what the area was used for. Many of these names have lasted for over 1,000 years. It's not only the Romans and the Anglo-Saxons that left some legacy, but also the Vikings. The Vikings, who came from Scandinavia, mainly Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, began raiding and settling in Britain from the late 8th century and left a lasting legacy on British history, culture, language, and law. 1. Place names. Many English towns still carry Viking names, especially in the Danelaw. Endings like "b" means farm or settlement, "thorp" means village, and "thwaite" means clearing come from Old Norse. For examples, Grimsby, Derby, Whiteby, and Scunthorpe, and also Langthwaite. And then the Viking also left some legacy in language. Viking settlers spoke Old Norse, which blended with Old English. Many everyday English words come from Norse, including sky, egg, knife, husband, window, anger, freckle, and even they, them, there. This helped shape the development of the English language. And now, we're moving to Chapter 4, British Nobility. The British nobility refers to a class of people with inherited titles or ranks, traditionally holding social, political, and economic power in the United Kingdom. It has deep historical roots and has evolved from the feudal system into the modern British aristocracy. Ranks of British nobility, peerage system. The peerage is the official system of the noble titles in the UK. The ranks from highest to lowest are Duke and Duchess. This is the highest rank below the monarch. And then there's also Marquess and Marchioness, a noble just below a duke, historically in charge of border territories, or marches. And then there is Earl and Countess, equivalent to a European count, the most common noble rank. Viscount and Viscountess, a middle-ranking noble, originally assistants to earls. And then there is Baron and Baroness. This is the lowest rank of the peerage, but still a member of nobility. Each of these ranks may be hereditary, passed down through generations, or life peerages, granted for lifetime only. Britannica. The first is Duke and Duchess. Duke is a male title of nobility, typically hereditary, though some dukedoms are created for life. Meanwhile, Duchess is the wife of a duke, or a woman who holds a dukedom in her own right. Prince William and Catherine in 2022 and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in 2024 are the latest person to ever receive the British nobility from the kings. Prince William holds the title of Duke of Cambridge, and his wife, Catherine, is the Duchess of Cambridge, while Prince Harry and Meghan Markle also hold the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And then there is Marquess and Marchioness. Marquess is a title of nobility in the British peerage, ranking below a duke and above an earl. Meanwhile, Marchioness is the wife or widow of a marquess, or a woman who has been granted the title of marquess in her own right. This is the picture of Marquess David Cholmondeley and Marchioness Rose Hanbury. Rose Hanbury and her husband, David Cholmondeley, 7th Marquess of Cholmondeley, have found their relationship thrust into their spotlight, all thanks to an substantiated rumor accusing Hanbury of having an affair with Prince William. And then on rank number 3 is Earl and Countess. Earl is a rank of the nobility in Britain. The title originates in the Old English word in the Old English word earl, meaning a man of noble birth or rank. The word is cognate with the Scandinavian from jarl, and meant chieftain, particularly a chieftain set to rule a territory in a king's absence. There was no female version of the word. Indeed, the only female noble who had a title at all was the Cyninge, or queen. In fact, a female equivalent of earl never developed in England, and therefore the title of countess was borrowed from the title count, a title that never caught on with the English nobility. The picture is their Royal Highnesses, the Earl and Countess of Sussex and Fauvar. And then in the lower rank is Viscount and Viscountess. Viscount is a noble title in the British peerage system, ranking below an earl and above a baron. Meanwhile, Viscountess is the female equivalent of a Viscount. And then in the last rank, there is Baron and Baroness. Baron is the lowest rank of the British peerage in nobility system. Despite being the lowest ranking peers, barons are still considered membership of the nobility and may sit in the House of Lords if they hold a seat. Meanwhile, baroness is the female equivalent or the wife of a baron. There is also honors given by the king. Knight Bachelor. The Imperial Society of Knights Bachelor, founded in 1908, acts as the registry for Knights Bachelor. The Knights Bachelor do not constitute a royal order. It is an appointment. The appointment of Knight Bachelor to men only originates from the medieval period. Recipients have the title Sir but do not have post-nominal letters. There is no direct equivalent appointment for women. The society maintains the chapel of Knights Bachelors in St. Paul's Cathedral, where it holds its annual service of dedication. These are the examples of people who held the title Sir. The first one is Sir Alex Ferguson. He is the former Manchester United Football Club manager. And then there's also Sir Lewis Hamilton, a British racing driver who competes in Formula One for Ferrari. And then there's also Sir James Paul McCartney, English singer, songwriter, and musician of the famous group named The Beatles. But wait, there is another. It's Sir David Beckham. Beckham, OBE since 2003, was named on the King's Birthday Honours list, recognized for services to football and charity. David Beckham, the former England captain and global fashion icon, was knighted by the United Kingdom on Friday, 13 June 2025, for his services to sport and charity. The former Manchester United and Real Madrid star, who played 115 times for England, had been a candidate for the prestigious honors for years, making David Beckham the newest person to receive a title of Sir. Like other orders, the Order of the British Empire, or BE, comprises its own ranks. In descending order, the classes are Knight and Dame Grand Crosses, or GBE, and then Knight and Dame Commander, KBE and DBE, respectively. And then there is Commander of the British Empire, CBE, and Officer of the British Empire, or OBE, and then the last is Member of the British Empire, or MBE. Okay, so that's all of my presentation for Introduction to British History. My name is Muhammad Azmi Adian, and thank you for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.